Good morning. We are here today to discuss Parshas Yisro. The title for today's shiur is Relationship and Marriage Portals. This month of Shabbat, is sponsored by Rabbi Aaron and Becky Asaraf for the merit of a Refu'ah Shlema for Baruch Yehoshua Yisrael ben Simcha. Definitely appreciate them, their friendship and their support, and absolutely wish from our sincerest depths of our heart that Refu'ah Shlema to Baruch Yehoshua Yisrael ben Simcha. This week, we are also wishing and dedicating this class for Refu'ah Shlema for Perel, Sasha, bas Meril, Rivka, Shlomo ben Baila, Malka, Sura, bas Faiga, Rachel, and Moshe ben Simcha. And we also, this week, are dedicating this class to the memory of Yehoshua ben Tzvi Nechemia. May his neshama have an aliya. So with everything going on in the world, it's amazing to recognize that we're not that far away from the P word known as Purim, which precedes the bigger P word known as Pesach. Hard to believe we're already here again. And in this week's Parsha, we're already at the giving of the Torah. It feels like we started Sefer Bereshis just yesterday. So we're going to begin today with a few overview questions. And hopefully through the learning today, we'll have a better understanding of our interpersonal relationships, the way that we become effective, and the way that we impact other people as well. So here are a few major overview questions on Parshas Yisro. As per one opinion in Chazal, in the Gemara, the coming of Yisro, that means Yisro meeting Moshe and the Jewish people in the desert, happens after the Mount Sinai experience, which means post the Ten Commandments and even post the sin of the golden calf, and it's phrased as sometime after Yom Kippur, presumably, according to this one opinion. Now, there's another opinion that says that Yisro came before. Today, we're going to be discussing Rashi's opinion in contrast to Ramban's opinion. Rashi's opinion goes with the one of the Chazal opinions that say that Yisro comes after the giving of the Torah, even though in our Parsha, he is mentioned before the Ten Commandments, before the giving of the Torah. So when the Torah here opens up with a sentence that says, Yisro, the Kohen of Midian, Yisro, the Kohen of Midian, the priest of Midian, the father-in-law of Moshe, heard everything that Hashem commanded to Moshe and to the Jewish people, his nation, that Hashem took them out of Egypt. It's interesting that it doesn't mention that he heard about the giving of the Torah, which is one of Ramban Nachmanides questions on Rashi. But again, this is the way one major opinion in the Gemara holds, and this is what we're going with today, but it's out of order. So even though it says that Yisro heard everything, and Yisro came, and Moshe greeted him, and Yisro was so happy, and he blesses Hashem, and he brings offerings, and then he gives Moshe advice about how to judge the people. All of this happened after the Ten Commandments, after Yom Kippur, which chronologically in our Sefer Torah would be sometime in the middle or after Parshas Kisisa. So the question becomes, why should the Torah, in fact, write it out of chronological order? Why does the Torah deviate from the normal chronological system that would seem to be the correct method to employ to go in order? So, for example, the end of Parshas Beshalach, maybe not even for example, but a way to contextualize this question is at the end of last week's Parsha, the end of Parshas Beshalach, we have the war against Amalek. We could have gone straight from the war against Amalek to the fact that the Jewish people traveled away from that place called Rephidim, and then they get to a place called Desert Sinai. And that would have begun our Parsha more logically with the paragraph that begins in the third month, that the Jewish people left Egypt. They came to Desert Sinai, and they traveled from there to Desert Sinai. They camped in the desert opposite the mountain. That seemingly would have been a very good, seamless flow from the end of Parshas Beshalach to the opening paragraph, which could have been in the third month the Jewish people arrived to Desert Sinai. But instead, the Torah goes out of order, and it mentions the entire proceedings of Yisro hearing everything that he heard, coming and sending a message to Moshe, Moshe going out and greeting Yisro, and Yisro brings Zipporah and their children, and Yisro's offerings, and the whole story with the judges. All of that happened later. So just put it later. What's the problem with putting it later? So that's major overview question number one. Question number two. There's a big emphasis here on Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe. Almost every time that the Torah does mention Yisro, almost every time, it either mentions Yisro, the father-in-law, or just the father-in-law. But it doesn't ever say Yisro by himself, except for two cases. And we're going to go into some of those discrepancies later. But the point is, why is there a major emphasis here in our Parsha on the father-in-law of Moshe? All we need to do is say Yisro. We know he's the father-in-law. We don't need to repeat it umpteen times. Question number three, overview question number three is, it's indeed difficult to understand that Moshe could think it reasonable that he would, by himself, judge a nation of approximately 3 million people. That seems rather illogical and unreasonable. What is it about Moshe Rabbeinu's thinking process that allows him to think, this is going to be a good idea. I'm going to sit every day, all day in judgment, even though the rabbis talk about it wasn't really all day, but whatever, I'm going to sit many hours a day. I'm going to judge the people by myself, all 3 million of them, or whatever amount of them come to court. How is that even a reasonable pre-thought, as we say in the Gemara, ahava amina? So it seems kind of bizarre that Moshe Rabbeinu would employ such a strategy, and that neither Moshe Rabbeinu nor any of his advisors, like Aharon or Nadav and Avihu, or the 70 elders would say, hey, Moshe Rabbeinu, this might not work out so well. It's really critical to learn how to delegate, right? So why is that a reasonable thought, apparently, that Moshe is employing, that he by himself should judge everyone? That's overview question number three. Now, it's also interesting that when the Torah first, we're going to go now a little bit more into the sentences themselves. And as I mentioned, the first sentence says that Yisro, the father-in-law, the Kohen of Midian, the father-in-law of Moshe, heard everything that Elohim, Hashem, did for Moshe and for the Jewish people, that he took them out from Egypt. And then it says, Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe, takes Zipporah, the wife of Moshe, after her having been sent. And then another time it says, Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe, came to the desert, that he was camped there, meaning with Moshe's wife and children. And then he says, I am Yisro, your father-in-law. I am your father-in-law, Yisro. So the point is that in the opening sentence, it says Kohen, he's the priest of Midian, Yisro, his name, and that he's the father-in-law of Moshe. So we have three appellations, right? Three descriptions. Most of the time, it is only the father-in-law of Moshe, and sometimes it's Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe. So why is the Torah changing orders, and why is the only time in our whole parsha that it mentions Yisro as a Kohen is the opening sentence? Why is that? Another question is that, as I mentioned, there's only two places where the Torah uses only Yisro as the description. And that happens after Moshe bows down to Yisro and they come to the tent. Moshe tells his father-in-law all the things, the travails that they had and how Hashem saved them. Then the Torah says, this is chapter 18, sentence 9, Yisro became very happy. At least that's one explanation. He became very happy. Only Yisro. It doesn't say father-in-law. It doesn't say Kohen. And he became happy, what? Over all the good that Hashem did for the Jewish people. And then in the next sentence, Yisro begins a long declaration. And again, it's Yisro says. What does he say? Baruch Hashem. The first person to say Baruch Hashem. Blessed is Hashem. That he saved the Jewish people from the hand of Mitzrayim, from the hand of Paro, that he saved the nation from being enslaved in Egypt. Now I know, says Yisro, that Hashem Elohim is the greatest of all. That Hashem is the greatest of all divine powers, so to speak, because of the way that Hashem took care of the Egyptians. So in these two sentences, the Torah says only Yisro. It does not say father-in-law, and it does not say Kohen. So why is that? Then a further question is, as we mentioned, the different times Yisro, sometimes it says it puts Yisro before father, one time puts father-in-law before Yisro, the rest of the time it seems to be Yisro before the father-in-law, or only Yisro. Okay. Now, Rashi also makes a point over here in a couple of places that there's an emphasis on the idea that Yisro was coming to the desert to learn Torah, to hear words of Torah, to hear words of Torah. And really, it doesn't say that in the sentences. So a further question is going to be, how do Chazal know that Yisro's interest here is words of Torah? And Chazal also say, Rashi also brings it on sentence 8, for example, that Moshe was trying to draw Yisro close to Torah. And again, that is not explicit in the sentences. And as we pointed out in our first major overview question, we haven't even mentioned yet the giving of the Torah. So it's so interesting that it's not in the sentences and it's before the 10 Commandments, and we're already assuming that Yisro and Moshe have an interest in Torah. It's specifically Torah information, words of Torah. Now, a couple more questions and then we'll begin with an answer, because we've got a lot to discuss here, a lot of very interesting kind of, for me anyway, some breakthrough points. When Yisro sees that the people are standing over Moshe from morning until evening, it was the next day, rabbis say it was the day after Yom Kippur, meaning that from after Yom Kippur and on, Moshe was sitting in judgment and the people were just standing from morning until evening. So Yisro sees that, and he says, what is this that you're doing? Why are you sitting by yourself and the whole nation is standing over you from the morning until the evening? So Moshe says, look, the people come to me to seek out Hashem. And when they have some kerfuffle, right, they have some dispute, they have some matter, and I sit in judgment between a man and his friend, and I inform them of the statutes of Hashem and of his Toros, of his laws. So the father-in-law of Moshe says to him, that's not a good thing that you're doing. You're going to get worn out. The people are going to get worn out that are with you. The people that are with you are going to get worn out, because this is a very heavy matter that you're undertaking. You're not going to be able to do it by yourself. So listen to me, and I will give you counsel. Hashem should be with you. You, Moshe, you sit opposite the people, opposite Hashem, I should say. You should sit opposite Hashem, and you're going to bring the matters to Hashem, and you're going to warn them of all the laws and inform them the way that they should go and the deeds that they should do. And separately, you should find fitting judges among the Jewish people, men of valor, men of truth, men that have a certain disdain for material possessions, and you'll appoint them as officers of thousands, officers of hundreds, officers of 50, officers of 10, one over 1,000, additional one over every 100, additional one over every 50, additional one over every 10. Now, my question is very simple. Aside from our overview question is, it does not seem reasonable for Moshe to judge all these people by himself, because you end up appointing thousands of judges. My question is, why does Yisro begin his advice with 2 sentences which say, listen, Moshe, you sit opposite Hashem, and you will bring the matters to Hashem, and you're going to warn the people, or adhere them about the statutes and the Torah, and inform them what they should do. That is what Moshe was doing. That's literally what Moshe was doing. So why is Yisro saying, okay, you do all that, but appoint other judges? Yisro should say, okay, everything is great, but you need to delegate. Now appoint other judges. Why does he go through this whole description of, you sit opposite Hashem, bring the matters to Hashem, inform the people of the statutes and the laws? That's what he was doing. So what is Yisro doing by those 2 sentences? That's another question. The more questions we're not going to get to right now, but we're going to now go into what I think is the beginning of our answer. So I'd like to suggest on this whole theme of father-in-law, the word chasan needs a deep dive. And we're going to begin with a basic concept that I think all of us know to be true. And that is that blood relationships are concrete. And as much as they may be successful or not successful, there may be a close bonding or there may be an estrangement, nothing changes the fact that the father of a child is the father of the child, and the child of the father is the child of the father, mother, father. Blood relationships are a concrete reality that are a foundational aspect of human socialization. And whether there are good relationships or bad relationships, that's a different question. But there's an innate, concrete basis for relationship by virtue of blood relative concept. Now, there's a whole different kind of relationship, which is called the marriage relationship. People get married that are not blood related, so they become related, but it's a different foundation of relationship. The relationship of marriage is only by commitment and choice. Yes, we have formalized ceremonies, and in Torah Judaism, it's very rigid, right? Once a person is married, it's a whole set of laws. There's only particular ways to break the marriage. There's only particular ways to formalize the marriage, right? It's a very concrete institution, but it is not concrete innately. It's the commitment that makes it real. That's what we call marriage relationships. Okay, so that's one important starting point. One further important starting point is that what is a relationship? A relationship is where two people do things for each other, care about each other, learn from each other, do things together, right? That's what a relationship is. That's one level of a relationship. But another whole level of relationship is to look at the world through the lens of that relationship and through the eyes of the other person. So a simple example would be that a person goes to Disney World as an adult. If he then takes his child to Disney World, he now sees Disney World a whole different way that he didn't see before. He can see it through the lens of his child, which would be very different than taking a random stranger child to Disney World. So the idea of a relationship is not only do things together, care for each other, do things with each other, and for each other, it's also not only learn from each other, it's also see a whole different view of the world because I'm open to that other person. I have access to that other person has access to me, and through that bond, we're able to see different realities than we would otherwise see. That's why I'm calling the title of the class today, Relationship and Marriage Portals. A relationship is a portal whereby we are able to get views, paradigms, information in a whole different way that we could not get without that relationship. Now, here's a fascinating piece of Torah study that I did this week that it kind of blew me away when I realized it, and that is, where is the first time that the Torah uses the word chasan, which means either groom, father-in-law, or son-in-law. It means any one of those three things. Father-in-law, son-in-law, or groom, like a marital groom. The bride marries a groom, that's the chasan. Where's the first time that the Torah uses this word? And the first time is in Sodom, when the angels say to Lot, Sodom is going to be destroyed, and this is chapter 19, sentence 12, and they're saying, listen, who else do you have here? A chasan, son-in-law, uvanacha and your sons, uvanosacha and your daughters, and everything that is in that you have in the city, take out from this place, because we are going to destroy this place, because the screams are too great. Hashem has sent us to destroy it. And then Lot goes out, and he speaks to his sons-in-law, the ones that married his daughters, and he says, get up, get out from this place, because Hashem is destroying the city. And he was like a mockery. He was like a joke in the eyes of his sons-in-law. That's what the Torah says. So a bunch of things like popped into my consciousness that I was like almost couldn't believe what I was reading. First of all, why should this be the first description of a son-in-law? We have other sons-in-law in the Torah. I'm not going to mention them now, but they're obvious. Why is this the first time that we find son-in-law or father-in-law the word chasan? That's one question. Another question is, when the angels are asking Lot, they're saying, hey, who else do you have son-in-law, sons, your sons and your daughters? I would have thought that the order would be the opposite. Your sons, your daughters, and your sons-in-law. Why does he start? Why did the angel start with, who else do you have here? Your son-in-law. I would have thought he's going to start with his own children. Why does he start with son-in-law? And then the question occurred to me, the angels are sent on a mission, right? At least one of them is supposed to save Lot, and presumably whoever goes along with Lot. So they don't know if Lot has other sons-in-law or daughters-in-law? They don't know. Why are they asking Lot? They should say, Lot, okay, let's get everybody. We're going. We got to get them. Why do they say, Od mi lachafo? Who else do you have here? A son-in-law, daughters, children, sons. Like, don't ask. Just tell them and tell them, let's go. So I realized that it must be that the angels have permission to save Lot. But the question is, who's with Lot? Who is part of Lot's world? In other words, which relationships that Lot has that are familial relationships are really part of Lot's world because they see his worldview and they will be influenced by his worldview and they will take his worldview seriously and they will be able to see Sodom differently because of their relationship with Lot. You know what the answer is? Amazing. Anybody who's part of Lot's house, that's automatically part of Lot. And so therefore, the daughters that live at home, anybody who's at home, including his wife, automatically taken with Lot. That's not a discussion. The angels don't say, hey, do you want to take your wife and daughters with you that live here in the house? No, that's a given. But anybody who's out of the house, it depends on the commitment of the relationship. And this is a very interesting thing, as many of us have married children or will be having married children, God willing, because there's a difference between when your children live at home and when they don't live at home. Because even though the blood relationship of parent-child is concrete, it's very different when they're in the home and when they're out of the home. Because when they're in the home, it's naturally a shared worldview and largely influenced by the parents. But when they leave, it might be or it might not be. There's certainly a basis that it could be, and there should be a trust that it will be a shared worldview, but it is not necessarily the case. So therefore the angels say, listen, Lot, outside of your house, Od mi lachafo, who is really with you? And the one that they begin with is a son-in-law, because what they're saying, that relationship is only a committed relationship of marriage because they married your daughters. Are they really with you? Are your daughters really with you now that they're married? Are your sons, now that they're out of the house, are they really with you? It's actually sons and then daughters, right? That's the question that they're asking. And amazingly, Lot thinks that they are until they laugh in his face. And they don't go with him and they die. Because as much as Lot could have had a real shared worldview relationship based on the commitment of marriage, he didn't. Because Lot has very challenging relationships. His wife did not see eye to eye with him. She looked back and she turned into salt. His daughters could not get on the same page with him. They got him drunk in order to produce children. And the other married ones that were already out of the house were so distant that even though it was a marriage and even though they were his children, they would not see his worldview. That's what we learn from the Parsha of Lot. Now, that's a whole new window into understanding much more about Sodom and about the narcissism of immorality and the pursuit of material pleasures and all of that, which we're not going to get into now, but it definitely does affect how a person builds their closest relationships, that you could actually think that you have a real relationship with someone only to discover when the chips are down, your in-law children or your in-laws, it could be, your children, they may not be on the same page with you. Just an amazing concept. Now, we go back to our Parsha. The reason I suggest that the Torah makes such a strong emphasis of Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe, is because Yisro, who is the Kohen of Midian, is opening himself up completely to his son-in-law Moshe's worldview. He is looking at what happened to the Jewish people from the point of view of Moshe and intuiting what that feels like for Moshe. Why? Because he has that level of respect and love for his son-in-law Moshe. He wants that relationship with Moshe. So much so that he's looking to change himself because of his relationship with Moshe. He's wide open to that, and that's what he's seeking. A lot of people ask, why didn't more people come? Why is it only Yisro? Yisro is so great because he, was willing to wake up and smell the coffee and other people weren't, just like October 7th. How many Jews are truly October 8th Jews? A lot of people are not waking up to smell the coffee. I say, you know what? That's true, but it's not even the main point. The main point is, who are you connected with that experienced October 7th? Are you seeing the world through their eyes? Are you really connected, desiring a relationship with them, and affected because they have been affected? Do you understand that we really are one nation, that we are all affected because we should have that level of committed relationship with our brothers and sisters, as everybody's been saying and davening, Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael? That's the real greatness of Yisro, is that he was evolving himself based on his daughter's marital relationship. And that's why over here, when it even says that Yisro takes Tzipporah, it doesn't say he takes his daughter, it says he takes Tzipporah, the wife of Moshe. That's who he's taking. And he's understanding that those children are connected to Tzipporah. He's understanding that they're connected to Moshe. That's a whole different exploration another time of those descriptions here, but it's also fascinating. Point is that Yisro is coming as Moshe's father-in-law, and he's opening himself up, not to hearing the facts of the information, but to being affected by the information, to be changed by the information. And that's why Yisro says, Moshe Rabbeinu, the following is a really big deal. He sends a message. This is the way Rashi learns, and I think other people learn as well. He sends a message to Moshe. For sure, Rashi learns this way. Come greet me. I'm coming to you with your wife and with your children. Come greet me. Come out and greet me. And if you don't do it for me, do it for the sake of your wife. Not for the sake of your wife, for the sake of your children. Because what he's saying is, in order for this commitment, chosein, marriage relationship to really take effect, it's a two-way street. Lot was open to his sons-in-law, at least he thought. Okay, maybe he didn't build a real relationship with them, but he thought. But his sons-in-law were not open to him. So Yisro is saying, I'm wide open to you. Moshe, are you wide open to me? Which is why Moshe's whole focus when he meets Yisro is to greet Yisro, is to bow to him, to kiss him, and to ask about him, to show that the relationship with Yisro is something that Moshe desires, like the Torah said earlier in Parshas Shemos, Vayoel Moshe l'sheves es ha'ish. Moshe desired to dwell with the man. Says Moshe, I desire the relationship with you, and I'm married to Tzipporah also because of you, because I want a real relationship with you. And when you deal that way with people, that's when people can become affected. And so the reason that the Torah says this whole story before it mentions the giving of the Torah, even though it's technically out of order, is because the Torah is saying, guess what? We're going to get to a second half of this, hopefully, but first half right now. Guess what? Our relationship with Hashem is also a relationship of commitment. We're not physically connected to Hashem. We're physical human beings. We're totally different beings. But it's still a relationship of marriage, which is how the rabbis understand the whole Mount Sinai experience. We're getting married to Hashem, which means we become completely affected by Hashem's worldview, by Hashem's Torah. And so the Torah is telling us that the way to understand the Mount Sinai experience is the same as understanding the Moshe Yisro experience. The Torah sets it up first to explain to you what the giving of the Torah is all about. It's a committed relationship by choice, where the people are looking at the other person as not only someone to learn from, but somebody to view another whole universe through. And that's the real magic of Torah. Because Torah is not just concrete information. Torah is a worldview, and everybody's portion is Torah. In Torah is different than everyone else's. And Hashem's infinity allows for each person to have their own Torah universe. It's literally what we daven for. It's literally what we say. Every person's portion in Torah is different than everyone else's. And in order for the Jewish people to have a whole Torah, they have to have the kind of relationship that Yisro has with Moshe and Moshe has with Yisro, because that's the only way we're going to learn other people's Torah and have another whole universe of Torah presented to us by virtue of our relationships with other people. And so that's what I'm suggesting is a major reason why this Parsha comes before that Parsha. But there's another element to that, and that is that when Yisro sees how Moshe is handling the people, he's saying to himself, Moshe Rabbeinu right now, and he's saying to himself before he tells Moshe Rabbeinu, right now, the judgment and the Torah that is being implemented is only Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah. Everybody comes to Moshe Rabbeinu for judgment. Nobody else is judging. Says Yisro, that's not the way to do this, because then everybody's only learning your Torah. And what it really has to be is that you empower everyone else to have their Torah and that they can be a judge. And this way, it's not only a question of scale, how many people can get judged. What it is really is empower the people that their relationship with Hashem empowers them to the point that they themselves have a Torah view that they're presenting to the world. And that is a way that people will be excited and not just learning only, so to speak, only Hashem's Torah. Now, we can't go so deeply into it today, like what exactly was Moshe thinking, but certainly part of what Moshe was thinking is that I'm the intermediary to Hashem, because Hashem is teaching the Torah through me. There's no question that that was the case. And therefore, it's better for people to learn from the person who was taught directly by Hashem. And there is truth to that. And the people should definitely have sought to have as much of that as they could. And that's a complaint on them later in Sefer Devarim, that the people should have complained, we want to hear Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu. But at the same time, it was necessary, and it is better for the interest of the people, for the comfort level of the people, that they should be empowered to also employ their relationship with Hashem by turning that understanding into Torah and judgment that they would do themselves. And of course, if they wouldn't know the answer, then they would go to Moshe, and Moshe would go back to Hashem. So the reason that Yisro begins with his advice to Moshe by saying, listen, you're going to become worn out. Listen to me. You should be sitting opposite Hashem and bringing the words of Hashem to the people, and you'll inform them the Torah and everything. What he's saying is, don't be a judge. Don't be a judge. Let other people be the judges. You be the interlocutor. You be the one to bring the information. Everybody else will learn the Torah from you. Through you, they will have a real understanding of Torah, of Hashem's Torah, and that will become their Torah, and then they will be able to be judges. That's great, and they'll be excited. And of course, as a matter of law, if they are stuck, they can come to you for answers, but you're only the intermediary. That's why he says, you be for the people opposite Hashem, and you bring the matters to Hashem, and you'll tell them what Hashem says, but they will be the judges, and you need to appoint them as the judges for the whole delegation team. So in addition to the lesson that the marriage relationship that we have with Hashem is similar to the relationship that Yisro has to Moshe, is the fact that Moshe listens to Yisro's worldview. That's the amazing thing. It's true that Yisro is open to Moshe, and it's equally true that Moshe is open to Yisro. That's a real chasnus relationship, where they're not really blood related, but they're so bonded based on the family commitment of marriage that Moshe is totally willing to accept Yisro's worldview. He's not put off by it. He doesn't think like, Yisro, you don't talk to God, I talk to God, which would be probably a lot of people's normal reaction. He doesn't think, this guy, this ger, how's it going to look if I listen to him? Like I don't know, like he knows, I don't know, right? No, he listens because the relationship with Yisro is real. But what that really says is that the Jewish people are worthy of receiving the Torah because they're worthy of receiving other people's Torah, because they build relationships of credibility based on commitment. Our commitment to Hashem, our commitment to each other, all of that means that we're truly worthy of receiving Hashem's Torah. So in addition to the Parsha of Yisro coming before the Torah to teach us that our relationship with Hashem is similar to the relationship Moshe has with Yisro, it's telling us the worthiness of Moshe and the worthiness of the Jewish people. We really do adopt the worldviews of other people with whom we have real relationships. Obviously, it has to make sense. We don't check our brains at the door. We critique. We try to understand if it's good and real. We will ask Hashem, hopefully, for advice. As Yisro says, check with Hashem. But he's truly open to Yisro's understanding that it's not good enough to have one judge, one teacher of Torah, and then everybody else goes on their way. You have to empower them to become judges themselves and empower them that their committed relationship will open them up to a universe of Torah. And you need that blending of everybody's views in order to have a real Torah that is being taught, judged, and practiced in Klal Yisrael. So all of this is to explain why the Parsha of Yisro is out of order, and why it's so fundamental to understand the father-in-law relationship. But another major point is that as much as we're open to real relationships and to other worldviews, and that's so important in order to be able to absorb as many legitimate, infinite ideas as we can of the world of infinite ideas, another major point is that we should never have a relationship with anyone only by virtue of a relationship with someone else. So, what I mean by that is that as much as Yisro is connected to Moshe, and as much as he sees everything that Hashem did for the Jewish people through the eyes of Moshe, Yisro himself, by himself, not as Moshe's father-in-law, makes the following evaluation. I am overjoyed, says Yisro, not Yisro the father-in-law. Yes, of course, he's biased because he's the father-in-law, and he loves Moshe, and he's open to that relationship. No, he is overjoyed that there is a God that would do this for his nation. That's why the Torah only says Yisro, not the father-in-law of Moshe. Vayichad Yisro, not the father-in-law of Moshe. Yisro is overjoyed what Hashem did for Moshe because he makes his own Yisro paradigm evaluation, says this is amazing to have a God like that. Now I know, says Yisro, Baruch Hashem, Yisro, not the father-in-law of Moshe. He's open to learning the information, but he makes the critical judgment for himself as his own identity. Ata yadati, now I, Yisro, know. Not because Moshe is my son-in-law, I know that there is Hashem. No, I know. I learned through Moshe, but I know. I make a judgment call as me, myself, Yisro, that Hashem is the greatest of all powers, the way that he handled Egypt. And then Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe, takes offerings because of his incredible respect for Moshe also, in addition to being Yisro, and he brings offerings, and Aharon, and all the Jewish people come to eat with the father-in-law of Moshe because the whole nation validates the relationship with Yisro, and this is why in the long-term future, Yisro and his descendants are friends of the Jewish people as well. And there's a question in the Rishonim if Yisro actually stayed with them in the desert or not. Rashi says no, Ramban says yes, that throughout the years of the desert and even later, Yisro and his descendants lived next to the Jewish people. So the bottom line is that when it comes to relationships, we have two types. We have the concrete blood relationships, and for sure because of that, there's always a basis to either grow and help each other in that relationship, to even overcome estrangement if there is, or just to continue to make it better. That's always a credible basis. But in a marital relationship, it's only real as long as there's ongoing commitment and ongoing engagement. And that's why marriages depend on the ongoing working together, on the ongoing, getting closer to the other person, because that's the only basis. It's the choosing to be together. And that's true on some level in our relationship with Hashem and the Torah, because it's a marital relationship. And that marriage requires constant effort and constant work and a constant willingness to be open to learning and to be truly available to the other person, both in terms of access, but also in terms of understanding their points of view. And that is absolutely critical in Torah. And of course, part of the sin of the golden calf is the Jewish people cutting themselves off from that openness and that willingness and becoming very demanding of what Hashem has to accept from them, as opposed to what they need to accept from Hashem. That's subject for another time. So, Be'ezras Hashem, now that we can understand this a little bit better, if we work more on our genuine listening to the other and wanting to understand the other person's view, we will be capable of a much greater relationship, but more importantly, to a much greater understanding of wisdom. Why the rabbis say, who is a wise person? Someone who learns from every person. That takes work, that takes respect, that takes commitment, and ultimately it takes being open to the other person's worldview. Any questions or comments? Thank you, Jacob.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
How do you balance understanding another, like you're saying, another worldview, but at the same time still staying authentic to yourself?
How do you balance another worldview as opposed to?
Like you're saying you're taking in someone else's worldview, like Moshe took in Yisro's worldview, right?
Yeah.
And that would be also, I think, very challenging, right? Because he's a ger, and you're going from Apikaris, and now you're going to a different understanding, and that helps him grow as well. But then how do you still stay true to yourself or your authentic self? Like, how do you still have parts of yourself without getting rid of other parts? Does that make any sense?
Yes, very good question. So we see that Yisro is capable of it, because we see that, like I pointed out, that when it comes to the happiness over all the news and to his declaration of Baruch Hashem, or now that I know Hashem is the greatest, that's only him. So I think that that's the Torah way of saying to us, Jessica, in answer to your question, that as long as we're making an internal evaluation based on our understanding to the best of our ability as a human being, now that I've learned clearly this other world view from someone else, does it make sense? Is it credible? Do I stand behind it as my own judgment rather than just blindly, so to speak, trusting another person? That's how we maintain that balance. We have to be very clear on our own judgment, that we make determinations based on our perception as well, not just based on what we learn from someone else. We don't take our brains out the door.
Okay, thank you.
So in other words, Yisro held himself responsible for his relationship with Hashem, not Moshe.
Yisro held himself responsible for his
own relationship with Hashem.
Right, but isn't that all of us? Isn't that what all of us should be doing? Holding ourselves responsible for our own relationship and actions?
100%. That's my point. So as much as we'll say Torah Tzvi Moshe, and it's a Masorah from what we had before, and we accept what our parents taught us, we have to say to ourselves, okay, is it what we really think? Am I able to credibly say this is what I really think? Yes, we have to do that as well. We should be open to it, but we also have to have an evaluation system internally that demands responsibility from our own judgment.
Right. And it's also like understanding our own core values, I guess, and see how that implements.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. Have an awesome day. Reminder to everyone to zoom over to my father in about 10 minutes.